Welcome to the Ken McElroy podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the part of the housing market that is selling faster than any other, and I think that this will surprise you. We're also going to get to how the government shutdown will affect the real estate market. And lastly, how do you know if it's a good time to buy a home? We're going to deep dive into this so you can compare it to your own personal experience.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. I was actually kind of surprised at the data that you pulled up on this, right?
Yeah, so when you're looking at the part of the housing market that's selling faster than any other, you have to look at the data, and the data is surprising.
Yeah, well, it's the high end, right? Like, it's really interesting. I guess if you really look at this, we do know that we have 50,000 baby boomers retiring each and every day. That has been going on for some time. But what's really, really interesting is there are some markets that have gotten really pricey. And other markets that haven't as much. And so you're starting to see people make decisions with their money, that try to figure out where they want to be. Even if they grew up somewhere, we're starting to see relocations. And, you're starting to see some of these really, really warm areas, like obviously Florida, Arizona, Texas, Tennessee's been off the hook, areas of North Carolina. And so people are like going to these places and they're actually buying all cash.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting. I was looking at, we live in Paradise Valley, Arizona, and the majority of the homes that are being sold here are all cash. Mm-hmm. So, and by the way, guys, we're talking about $10-20 million in cash, which is just beyond belief, right?
I think it's just really looking at the bigger picture of you have two different economies going on, right? You have the lower end of the market, which is a lot more sluggish than it has been in the last few years because, these little drop in interest rates and increases really affect people. If their mortgage is $300, $400, $500 more a month, that can make or break a deal. Where on the luxury side, prices are up 8.4% from a year ago. And that's a lot because these numbers are high, right? So luxury means anything over $2 million, right? So $2 million and above is a luxury market. So to be up 8.4% is significant.
Yeah. I also think though, if you're buying something, like our home, right? You're looking for location. You're not really too concerned about, is it going to go down, a little bit, or is it going to go up a little bit? I mean, it's nice. Don't get me wrong that the prices are trending up. That's for sure. But I think at the end of the day, it's very, very different. Like when my kids get into the market, obviously they're going to be watching their home equity, right? They're going to be paying down their mortgage. They're going to be, hopefully it'll grow over time. And, just like a lot of us, that's how we built wealth. That's how you personally built a lot of the stuff that you were able to buy after that. As your first condo went up, you did a line of credit against it and all that kind of stuff. That's pretty normal. But at the luxury market, people aren't looking like that. They're looking for like the certain lot or the certain house or the certain location or the certain submarket or a certain neighborhood. It's very, very different. They want to be on a golf course. They want to be like up in North Scottsdale, for example. It's very different. It's like a playground. You go into these communities that are all supported. They've got the pools and they've got the workout rooms and they got all that stuff. So it's very, very different in the luxury market.
You have to look at the reason, though, right? Because most of these people that are in this market were heavily invested in the stock market. The stock market's done really well the last few years. They're also usually trade-up buyers. These aren't first-time home buyers. So they made a bunch of money on whatever home they were trading out of because most likely they've owned it before 2020. And so now they're selling that as well. So you're really, being able to swap all of that where, your first-time home buyers, they typically aren't as heavily invested in the stock market. They don't have any real estate they're trading out. So they literally have to save for this down payment that's nearly doubled since 2020. So you just have such a different demographic. So I think you're going to continue to kind of see this rise in the luxury market, ongoingly.
Well, I know. And there's a number of examples. And let's don't forget about crypto, right? Like if people had even just a little bit, right? Because I think if you're in the luxury market, you threw just a little bit of money into crypto, a very small amount, you've done very well. Also gold. I just had a dinner 2 weeks ago with an extremely wealthy family that actually is third generation farming. Now I'm talking about 10, 20, 30,000 acre stuff. And we were talking about physical gold and the price of gold and how they were investing in gold. So there are other things other than stock market. I think the middle class generally has most of their money in the stock market. Mm-hmm. But I think once you get to, what would consider to be wealthy, it's in that, but it's also in a lot of other stuff. Mm-hmm. It's in businesses, it's in crypto, just like you had a little bit of money in crypto. There's nothing wrong with putting a little money in there. I personally, as you guys know, have been talking about gold forever. Kiyosaki just bought a house using gold. Like literally, he's been a huge gold bug for years, back from the 70s. And so he wanted to buy another house. And so he cashed out his gold and bought the house, all cash. And I asked him, like, how much did it cost you? He's like, well, my original cost on the gold was only about $400,000. And so, and the house was in the millions, right? And so, in his mind, he paid $400,000 for the house. I was like, so let's don't forget all the other things, right? That people have their fishing line in, right? Typically there's a lot of things, and most wealthy people have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sources of income coming in.
It's so interesting because it really tugs on both ends of the market, right? Because if your $2 million home, is continuing to go up at 8%, but your $800,000 home, you're being tugged both ways, right? Because you have these first-time buyers that can't get in, so that's tugging you down. But then, if your home is 1.2 million and this one's 2 million, like you also have that tugging you forward. So it's a very interesting, the divide. There comes a point where the divide cannot keep going up 8% if this market's going down, right? But as of right now, because of the two different sides of the economy, you are seeing this very interesting divide.
It's a heck of a point. And I think if you're in hard assets, you probably have done okay. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, you're probably a little more at risk, right? Mm-hmm. And that is, it's creating more of a divide between let's call it the middle class. Middle class is actually getting crunched a little bit right now, but not if the middle class are making good decisions, because a lot of times the middle class can go either way. Mm-hmm. Right? They can go if all you do is relying on, let's say 2 people working in the household income, and one of you loses a job, or one of you is in a situation where you're not getting pay increases, and what you've done is you've just gotten better cars and better houses, and and bought trinkets like boats and second homes and all the other stuff that a lot of times you do. You might not have any liquidity, right? You might not have the wealth, and I think that's what you're starting to see. The clearly. When we were meeting with we bought 2 acres, and we were going to build a home. The home builder that we were riding our bikes around this weekend, and we saw they were everywhere. Like the person who was going to build our houses, and they told me, they said, the people that we're building for, they're just building cash, all cash, and these are massive homes. And so it is, like, to your point, extremely different world with what's happening in that, call it that first time home buyer, or maybe somebody who's just been in the market for a little while.
So the government is officially shut down.
Yeah. Can you believe it?
And this will be interesting to see how it affects the real estate market, or could affect the real estate market.
Yeah. We watch every weekend. We watched the news, which is the only time I really watch it, on Sunday mornings, right? Mm-hmm. And we rolled right into I think it was, her name's Margaret Brennan.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting because she had Schumer and Johnson on there, basically making their point on this shutdown, right? And I thought it looks to me like both these sides, red and blue, are just going to dig their feet in and wait for the other one to break.
Yeah, so this could be, quite a long waiting period. There's risks on both sides, to waiting. So But in the interim, I think you can anticipate this is going to be shut down most likely for a while. And during a government shutdown, federal workers are not paid. So most of them are furloughed. Some of them, like TSA, are deemed essential. So they have to work for free until they can all get their back pay. I mean, it really is silly because it's like everyone's just waiting for their back pay, and they get their back pay once the government reopens. I was listening to this podcast that was out of Washington, and they were saying it's like a celebration in Washington when the government shuts down because everyone's just off work and you're going to get paid. You're just not going to get paid yet, So it's basically like a paid vacation.
That'd be fun to go there right now.
Yeah, like I heard that the bars are
partying in the streets.
Yeah, I heard the bars are full and all the things, but there is real consequences.
Let's go to DC.
Well, there is real consequences for people though. So like the WIC program stop, like mothers don't, get any kind of subsidies for their kids. All these different government programs that aren't deemed essential are put on hold or discontinued, and then Trump has ideas of maybe firing people and getting all into that. But in the interim, this can really affect the real estate market. So
that's kind of the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you have we know there's at least 750,000 people being affected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, right?
Well, 750,000 workers, but that doesn't even count the people that are on these government programs.
That is a good point. Yeah. And I know, like, we've had friends try to go through the airport there, so you better get there early, right? Because there's an issue with TSA, obviously, the number of people. Although that probably needed to be fixed anyway. I don't know. Sometimes I go up to these TSA lines and there's like 10 people trying to get through, and there's 10 TSA agents. Mm-hmm. But that's another story for a different time. But the point is, you're going to have people affected financially, right? They're working and they're not getting paid, or they're not working and they're not getting paid, even if they are going to get a windfall later.
Well, but even these government subsidies, I don't know if they actually get a windfall in these government subsidies, but either way, like WIC programs and stuff, these people are already tight. Section 8, these people are already tight. So then when they're not getting the benefits, they can't do things like pay rent, buy a home if they're in the process of buying a home, those kind of things. And it's so as landlords, we could see issues like if you own a property that employs a lot of the military, if you employ a property that has a lot of people that are on these government programs, they might not be able to pay your rent because they might instead have to be buying their groceries.
Well, I know if I'm a Democrat, I know that Trump wants lower rates, and I know that the Fed is meeting on the 28th and 29th of October. And I know that the Fed is also concerned about unemployment. So this is going to be a real interesting gray time, right? Like if it does go that far, I sure hope not. I mean, I sure hope that they could figure something out and these people don't have to be disrupted financially. But it sure is looking that way. But I can't imagine that Trump's going to want this shutdown, even though they're independent. Don't get me wrong. I know they're supposed to be independent, but if they are independent, then why is he saying I want to fire Powell and trying to figure out who should be on that board next? Because it is running gray. But I do think that there's a little bit of pressure on the Republican side to fix this.
Well, there's pressure, but not a lot. There's not a lot on the Democratic side either. So I think that's why you could see an extension of this, because essentially the Democrats say they're not going to move their position at all. And then, what they want, which is subsidies for non-citizens for healthcare, the Republicans aren't going to do. So this is going to really be digging their feet in. Something else that is interesting is the flood insurance piece during hurricane season. So you have hurricane season coming up. We're in it right now, actually. And, for anybody that just bought a home, FEMA is not working. So you cannot obtain flood insurance. And that's going to be a big deal. And also, if any of these hurricanes were to hit, FEMA is not able to disperse funds or help because they're not really working. Yep. So
that's probably the same for FHA, VA, SBA, like all these HUD for sure, like all those government agencies that affect housing as well, right?
Yep, exactly. And so
it's a 1.5 trillion. I don't know. Is that a real number? They said that the Democrats want to put 1.5 trillion through.
That was their initial, that was their initial
God, that's
claim.
so much money. Holy cow.
But who knows what the Republicans want to do too. I mean, neither side really balances the budget right now.
Yeah. But I think there is one big thing that was supposed to happen that didn't happen. And that is the jobs report, right? So we should mention this. Like one of the things that you brought up here is during times like this, that what they do is they freeze economic data.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And they stop collecting it as well.
So, okay, why is this important? Why is it important? Because things are humming along, and then all of a sudden there's no data. So the jobs report was supposed to come out last Friday, and it didn't. Right. And this is a big deal because if you guys remember, it went from 4.2 to 4.3. Now, that was one of the things that everybody was talking about. Like, I know we lowered rates a quarter point at the Fed, but the Fed is also one of their mandates is to look at unemployment, and it's going up.
Yeah, so they have to, the real question is, what is Powell going to do with no data, right? And there is some data that they look at, like they lean on private sector sources, ADP payrolls, Indeed job postings, Redfin and Zillow housing data. So they're basically looking at all the stuff you guys can look at on the internet, and, and that can help them. But because of that, and it's not official data, the Fed doesn't really like to make any big decisions because they don't really have the true data, which makes a lot of sense. So the question comes to, will Powell continue to cut rates, or does he get skittish because he doesn't have data?
Right. That's the real issue, and as you pointed out before we got on here, I believe the inflation data comes out on the 15th. That probably won't. Right. And then you've got the inflation indices, and then you've got the unemployment metrics as well, all coming out supposedly before the Fed meets on the 28th. And so the Fed uses jobs, inflation, unemployment data to make decisions at the end of October. And, and of course, so to your point, where do they go? What do they look at? And I don't know about you, but if I was in that situation, I would probably just tread water. And I would say, listen, you guys need to open up the country, and then we can make good decisions. But it'll be interesting to see what happens because, this could be Powell's opportunity to fire back at the current administration.
Exactly. He might actually have a reason now to delay additional rate cuts.
And he might just do it out of spite, like, we're not going to do anything.
100%.
We're going to stay neutral, and then Trump will go, off his block.
Bananas. Yeah. Well, the other thing you have to look at is the bond market, right? Because so many of you point out when I talk about Fed rate cuts that it really comes down to the bond market, and you're not completely wrong. So the bond market then is up to, what the traders are thinking, right, as well, with no data. So a lot of times the bond market can get more volatile and choppy, which
rates
could then
swing during a bond market.
It could increase interest rates, right? So you might have what we've been talking about is saying it probably wouldn't happen, which would be that the bond market, throws off the cutting of interest rates. But now in this new environment, that could definitely happen.
Well, you think about all the decisions that get made, right, from Wall Street to mortgage rates. There's just so many things that people decide based on data, and the fact that it might be frozen, and you pointed out they're not even gathering it, right. So all of that is going to be an interesting thing to watch. But
Powell's already been through this because he, in 2018, the government was shut down for a month, which is the longest shutdown ever. And, what Powell said then was the Fed would have to navigate with less information. Now, the difference, though, in the end of 2018, early 2019, is there wasn't a ton going on then like there is now. So that even though that was interesting because he did say that, it'll be interesting to see what he does because now's a pretty crucial time for the economy.
Well, I think we should take Jerry and go on the road and go party at some of these nightclubs in D.C. and get the
I don't
real
think D.C.
scoop.
is really a nightclub place. Probably.
Well, there has to be like Georgetown. I've been to.
Yeah, but we're also talking about government employees. They're a little stuffy.
I don't know.
I
I don't know.
haven't met any that aren't.
Well, you could be right. So let's talk about some of these market-driven signals, right? So we've got with no government data, you've got the Treasury yields, the mortgage spreads, the inflation expectations. All that stuff is a bit of a flip of a coin, right? Right?
Yeah, it could be very different than what we've been predicting if this goes on for a while and really throws things off. I really don't know which side's going to cave. I mean, the Republicans might cave if there's a hurricane because they would need FEMA, unless there's a way around that I'm unaware of. And I don't even know what would make the Democrats cave here, to be honest.
There's a lot more to come. And I think I if I'm Powell, though, I'm taking a risk management approach, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm going to say, how do you navigate with less information? Like, it's already hard enough, right? And now some of the biggest things that they need, they're not going to have. So it's going to be a real interesting month. It's something to watch.
So a lot of people right now are wondering, is right now a good time to buy a home? And while a lot of people look at market indicators, honestly, your own life plan is more important than the market itself.
Yeah, because there are a lot of other things tugging at you, right? Like, so we probably should address those.
Yeah, because, people always look at interest rates and then they look at their, how much they can afford monthly to make a decision on buying a home. And while that's really important, if it's an investment property, it's totally different. And you should just look at those numbers. It's all cash in versus cash out. When it's your own home, there's definitely other things you need to consider.
Yeah, obviously. So the first one is, am I going to live here for the next 5 or 10 years, right?
This is a huge one.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people have a long-term perspective on things these days.
But sometimes they have a short-term perspective. Like, I was just talking to a buyer a couple of days ago, and he's like, yeah, I want to get a home now. And I kind of personally know him. So I said, well, how long do you plan on staying here? Because I feel like, your kids are moving, and what are you going to do? I don't know. Like, I probably just a couple years, maybe in my mind, it's just not a good financial decision to buy a home and live in it for 2 years.
Yeah, by the way, you guys know, I'm obviously, a real estate junkie pretty much, but the last home I was in 15 years, I still own it. I built it. And the home we just bought, what did I say to you? I said,
this is it.
I'm not moving again. Like for real. Like, guys, I had more than two, but let's call it 2 primary houses in Arizona. And I've had other houses in other markets and vacation homes and all that kind of stuff, and I still do. But the point is you have to have, in my opinion, you got to kind of have a long-term perspective. Unless you're somebody like my son, who's now in the market and he's looking to buy his first house. And so the question is, actually, I just had this conversation with him over the weekend. I said, as you buy your first house, you got to be thinking about a few other things. One is, do you want to sell it when you move out? How long do you want to be in it? And also, is it rentable, right? Mm-hmm. Now, because I don't care what you do, but you need to at least be thinking about those things. And so you might not want to rent it. You might not. You might want to sell it and use the cash and buy the next one. But Danille didn't. She rented hers and then did a line of credit and bought the next one and started her path of real estate investing. So these are things that a lot of people don't think about,
Well, right, because you have to think, too, when you're buying that home. So that's a good point you bring up. If you're one of these people that are scrappiers, like, I'm going to live in it for a year, 2, 3, and then I'm going to save up for my next property, and I'm going to rent this one and move into my next one, that's much more different than this is my family house where, I'm moving my whole family in here. Because what you're buying is different, too, right? Like, I deal with this with clients all the time where they want to buy this really nice rental property. And it's like, yeah, but there's a rental cap. So, you might buy, like in Arizona, a $450,000 house and a $600,000 house. Don't rent for that much different of a price because there's a cap on how much a tenant is going to spend to live in your house. Like, a tenant can't pay $4,000 a month most of the time in most markets because they would just go buy something. So you have to understand that when you're buying. So that's a good point. Is this going to be a rental or am I going to stay here? But then secondly, unless you're going to move out and rent it, you're going to want a place you're going to be staying at for 5+ years because the market could go down. You have to pay a lot to obtain this mortgage. When you're making payments on your mortgage, it doesn't even start to chip into the balance for a few years, because you're really just paying all the interest. So you really have to think about all of these things. And if you're not planning on staying somewhere for 5 or 10 years, you probably shouldn't buy. You should just, it makes more financial sense to rent.
Well, I got to tell you, so the last house that I still own today that I built at the very best time, 2008.
Yep.
So I was under construction, right? And of course I finished it and I moved in. But now let's take a look at what my life was like in 2008. I had a family, raising kids, built for the kids, essentially. You guys know at this point, a lot of you know, we do a lot of things for them, right? School districts, across some baseball fields, cul-de-sacs, backyards, all the, certain garage types, all that kind of stuff we do if we can, right? So very, very, very different scenario from when, maybe you're single, or maybe you're an empty nester, or maybe you're just relocating. Maybe you're going for somewhere because of a family, but all those things do have a huge, huge perspective on, obviously what you're going to do in that particular home.
Yep.
Right. And so to your point, on the rental side of that, you are right. There's a cap, right? There's a certain person. You can certainly buy really nice rentals, but then you are actually, what you're competing is probably in that luxury market, and how many people are actually, and then they're going to look. Like Danille's got a listing right now that's in an absolutely drop dead location in a beautiful condo project. And the HOA fees are so much. And did you see how that deal that I just sent?
Yeah, the HOA deal was like $2,500 a month.
24. Yeah, it was 24 and change a month. The HOA fees now the house was like $3.5 million. But you imagine that.
It's a lot of money.
HOA fees were basically 40 grand a year, right? And I didn't dig into why, but you start to look at these other things, again, on whether you're living there or whether you're going to try to rent it later. That house is going to sit for a while. The one I sent you, because of that, just like your condo has, and a condo's not set up for kids.
No,
it's set up for a couple or one person.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very different.
Yep. And the second thing you want to look at is, do you have 20% to put down? Now, the reason I bring this up is home prices have gone up significantly. And I know you only need to have 5% down to really buy your first house. However, you have PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. And that's not insurance for you. That's insurance for the bank, stating that since you're putting so little down, we want you to pay this private mortgage insurance so that if you default, we're kind of covered here. And you don't have to put 20% down, but in order to get rid of the PMI, which can really add up when you're buying a $500,000 home, it's important to consider.
Yeah, you just want to look at the cost of that PMI. It does cover the lender, but they consider anything under 20% of risk. So that's why they're insuring you, essentially. So, but to Danille's point, there's a cost to it, and you got to take a look at, you might be better off actually having that money work for you rather than for them, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, it's usually about $100, $150 per every 100,000. So, if you're putting 5% down on a $500,000 house, that's a lot of extra money, so you really have to consider that. Like, do you buy a house now, or do you wait till you have 20% saved up to buy the house? I mean, we're not in a market now where, like we were in 2020, where things were going up like crazy. We're in a more stagnant market. So you do want to have that conversation with yourself is, do we buckle down and save to the 20%, or do we just, pay the PMI?
Oh, I have one other thing that you might want to be looking at. If you are in a PMI situation, a private mortgage insurance situation, and you had it on there for, let's say, 2, 3, 4 years, my guess is that you're now well outside of that 80% number. So let me give you an example. So let's say you bought a house for $500,000, and you put down $100,000, let's say. So you're now in a PMI situation. You got a $400,000 mortgage. If that house went up in the last 4 years, you're now from a loan to value, you're significantly below that 80% mark. So now I know that is technically a refinance, But I also know that you need to take a look at that PMI. So you might have your home equity might be high enough to where you can get away from that PMI at this point. So just an FYI.
Well, that or maybe even a home equity line of credit, depending if you can find a bank that'll do it. If you just need an extra $10,000 or $20,000, you might be able to get that.
It's possible, yeah.
So number 3 is, and first-time home owners really don't realize this, and I've chatted with them about it, is you need a savings account. Because
just a sec, who doesn't have a savings account?
So many home buyers, they use all of their savings to put the money down to buy the house.
Oh,
so they have a savings account, but they basically drain it all. They don't think about the savings account part.
Oh, okay. So like if you need $50,000 to buy something, they have $50,000.
Yeah, or $55,000, or you know what I mean. They don't really have a savings,
and they move it all in, and so they have zero.
Yes. Yeah. So you have to think of that.
That's the PMI thing.
Yeah. Yes, correct. Yeah, because your house is going to break no matter how many inspections you do, how great the inspector was. Your HVAC system might go out. I just got a call today. One of my tenants has roof rats. Like, you got to get an exterminator out there. Like, you have all these, things that come up when you're a homeowner. So you really should have money in the bank for that.
I get it. Like, but I do understand, like, all right, I want to buy a house. I want to get into the game. I want to get into a hard asset. The thing is if you have any kind of income, you need to save like crazy that next year.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's okay, I think, to move it all over, and buy something, to be able to get in the game. But to Danille's point, something can and will go wrong. Murphy's Law, for sure. Something will happen. You will need something. Or maybe it's just, something that, your refrigerator, it could be anything that you might need. And you don't want to get into the situation where you're financing all this stuff.
Well, and I think, as people come from being tenants, they sometimes don't realize everything that their landlord does or takes care of, and I think that's part of it too, is when you're a tenant, you're just used to things break. I call somebody, they fix it. You don't really think about how much it costs. You don't really think about, any of that. But when now all of a sudden you're a homeowner, you have to think about those things. So let's go to the next one, which is when you're going to buy a home, location is everything.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know this,
Do you?
Yeah, well, I hope so. Gosh, I guess maybe it's just beating me.
Yeah.
Location. Here's the thing. Like, think of this, guys. Any of you, like, when you go on vacation somewhere, it doesn't really matter. Like, let's say San Diego, right? Where are you going to go? You're going to go, if you have kids, near, let's say, the zoo or Legoland or the beach or whatever it is. Like, your proximity of where you're going to be is the most important thing for you, for mobility, all that kind of stuff. That's where your head needs to be. And then it's not going to be 10 miles away. Because things were more affordable there. It's going to be tougher to have an Airbnb 10 miles away or 5 miles away or even 3 miles away, because a lot of people don't want to have cars. So this is such a big thing, right? Be where people are.
Well, just be where you want to be. If you're someone that wants to live in the middle of nowhere, that's fine too. But what you don't want is you don't want to buy something that is not really where you want to live, and you figure you'll just live there for a couple years and then you can move where you want to live. Because I know a girl that she was in Mesa. She bought in Arizona in Mesa, and she told me it was about a $70,000 difference between the house she wanted in Mesa and the house she wanted in Scottsdale. Now, this was in 2019. And they decided to go to Mesa because it was cheaper. Well, now she's upset because she actually wants to move to Scottsdale, but now there's a $150,000 difference between the house she wants in Mesa and the house she wants in Scottsdale. So, if it's a better area, it's going to appreciate faster. And also, if it's more expensive, even percentage wise, it's going to appreciate faster. So, your gap's going to get bigger, and you should never want to move somewhere for a while until you want to move where you want to move. You want to just wait and save and then move where you want to move.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Most pricing is higher in what you would call core areas. So core areas would be where, just like I mentioned earlier, where people want to be, right? And there's typically not room for a lot of additional supply.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a real point. So because there's not room for additional supply, let's say like an area that's built out, like Coronado Island, let's say San Diego, which I used to take the kids to when they were little. It's an island. Manhattan is an island, and that's why they're selling air rights, right? Because it grows to the edges and then it grows up. It goes, and then they start fighting against height, right? And so this is typical and normal. And so when you have a lot of people going to an area, it puts more demand on that core because you have a supply problem. And so more people, less supply, prices go up. And so that's actually what's happening here in Scottsdale with, it's not surprising. Mesa, by the way, is huge. Lots of areas to build. It's expanding. It's a growing area. Nothing wrong with that. But to your point, a lot of excess land and a lot of new development. Scottsdale, on the other hand, is one of those markets where it's really, really, really hard to build. And it's pretty buttoned up. The city, and it's the zoning and the height restrictions and all the stuff. And Paradise Valley is the same way. So that actually preserves value. Mm-hmm. When you can't do urban sprawl or whatever you want to call it, it actually preserves value. And like it or not, you have to actually play that into your decision.
Yep. And I like that a lot of home buyers, especially first-time home buyers, are really concerned about appreciation. They're buying partially for appreciation more than anything. That's why they want to get out of their rentals, is they want that appreciation. So when you look at that, a lot of first-time home buyers make a mistake and they want to get a really nice house in an area that's not that desirable because that's where they can afford. But that is not going to appreciate like getting the worst house in the best area.
I would, yeah, for sure. I would rather have like Danille, when I, twisted her arm, she bought a 2-bedroom home in Scottsdale. Now, most of you are like, why would she do that? Like, because there's a lot of people, that, by the way, they would say, I would never buy a 2-bedroom home. I would only buy a 3-bedroom or even a 4-bedroom or even a 5-bedroom home. Even if they don't have kids, mm-hmm. They're like, oh, yeah, we need those extra bedrooms. Don't ask me why, but they do. And I said to her, quite simply, this home is going to always be one of the more affordable homes in Scottsdale. Always, because it's 2 bedrooms. And obviously a 2-bedroom should be less than a 3-bedroom. And I said, therefore, it's always going to be an affordable play, a great rental for anybody who wants to be in that school district in the area. But there are people that say, and by the way, this was one of the worst homes in the area that you bought.
Yeah, but the home was $230,000 at the time, and the homes around it were over $1 million.
Right. And it needed renovation. It was not in great shape. It needed a roof and all that stuff. And remember, you said,
I was like, hell no, I don't want to, because mind you, I'm living in this, right? This is not a rental for me. I'm like, hell no, I don't want to live in this small house in this nice area. But it was all that I could afford. But I could have went to a worse area and got a nicer house, but then I'm super far outside of town.
So the best part is we were dating at the time. And we hadn't really gotten into our finances or anything like that. And I walk out. I said, you got to pay full price for this thing.
I know. You were dead set on it. And I trusted
you. Are you out of your mind?
I thought you were out of your mind. But I do know that at the time you knew more than I did about this stuff. So
I said, trust me, you got to pay full price. And she's like, I can't believe it. And then you called your dad.
Yeah, and my dad's like, no, don't do it. He's like, did you see that carpet? It's disgusting.
Luckily, your dad and I get along extremely well. But the point is, and what you did there was you bought what I would consider to be at the time the worst house in Scottsdale. Mm-hmm. Now, what's that thing worth?
It's worth $550,000.
Okay, so it's worth
double,
$300,000 more than you paid.
It's literally worth double. It doubled.
Yeah, in
9 years, but still.
Yeah, still, and it's paid off, and your renter is crushing it over there, and it's also one of the better spots to rent in Scottsdale.
Well, what's funny is property managers, because I work with property managers through my clients now, and I advise some of my clients to buy 2-bed, 2-bath homes in Scottsdale because I've had a lot of success with it. But the property managers always tell them not to do it. They're going to be so hard to rent. Nobody wants to rent a 2-2. And just my experience, I mean, I've never had a vacancy. I had a 1-month vacancy when I bought my last house. That's the only vacancy I've ever had. Because here's what I found is people that have 2 kids want cheaper rent. And sure, they would love a 3-bedroom house, I'm sure, but they also like the discount of not paying for the rent on a 3-bedroom house. So they put 2 of their kids in the master and they go in the other room and they call it a day.
Mind you, fenced yard, 2-car garage, courtyard, really, really incredible layout. These are nice, but built, 40, 50 years ago?
Yeah.
Probably. But renovated on the inside. And it's a neighborhood. Right.
And it's a really nice neighborhood. And that's why, when I'm working with these home buyers, it's like sometimes frustrating because, they don't want the worst house in the best neighborhood, but they want appreciation. And the way to get appreciation is for everything around you to be nicer, because what would you rather have? Everything be nicer and all these really, luxury and then your little place, or would you rather be the luxury place and you have to worry about everybody else around you hopefully redoing their houses to make the area nicer? I mean, I would rather be in the first position.
And you gotta think past the what you're looking at, right? So like the first thing Danille said was, I have to live here. And I was like, I know. This person was a pet sitter, right? Like
a pet sitter, drug addict, horror.
Yeah, like we walked in and there's all kinds of paraphernalia all over the place. But the point is the carpets were nasty. The place was nasty. And I'm like, it's a gut job. It's a redo. You'll get brand new appliances, brand new countertops, brand new flooring, brand new paint. And yes, that does cost. But again, back to the, I think the whole thing was 15 to 20 grand.
Yeah.
Completely all in, but like drop dead gorgeous.
Well, because the roof was good, the foundation was good, the structure was good.
I think we got the seller to put a new roof on as part of that. But the point is, what she got, you moved into that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What you got was a really nice place that was fully renovated from a 25 to 30-year-old interior. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people can't think past that.
Yeah, because here I do really believe though when you get a house, it's just a house, for a lot of people, like it's exciting, but it's like when you get a new car, like after a couple months, it's just a car. So, the things that I see people upset about is that they don't like their location, because that's the stuff that kind of smacks you in the face every day, right? You don't feel safe, riding your bike at night, or your kids can't play, or you're super far. You have to drive so far to work. Like those are the things that really bother people. I have yet to find someone that moves into the location that they want and then is upset because their house isn't big enough. Like, I know it can happen if you have a bunch of kids or something, but like, it's just so much more the opposite.
Yeah. The only thing that's scary at the place that you bought was your HOA board.
Yeah. My HOA board was scary. Well, I was like the youngest person that lived there at the time. So like they kind of picked on me.
They did not like you.
They didn't for literally no reason. I was at your house most of the time, but they just,
I remember she had an big, beautiful orange tree out back. God, and there was an orange that fell on the ground. Was it just? Well,
initially I did not know I had to pick up the oranges, so that was a miss on my part. So the first time, the first time there was like 10 oranges on the ground. Okay, like that was not good. But then after they gave me a citation for it, I'm like, oh crap, I have to be picking these up. They said it causes roof rats. Like that all makes sense. So then I was picking them up like every few days. So there'd be like 3 oranges on the ground every few days and I'd pick them up. Well, then I got another citation because they're like, we can't see any oranges. So I'm like, okay. So I literally had to pick them up every day after work. There'd be like an orange sometimes and I'd pick it up. But then I had to go on vacation to Florida and I had to ask my neighbor if she could come over every day to pick up the oranges. And then even doing that, one time they came by and there was an orange on the ground because apparently it fell in between them coming and me checking. So I got another citation. So that's when I said, that's it. Like, I'm done here. And
I love Ken
had me go through my CCNRs to find out they can't even govern the freaking fruit. So then I had to write them a letter letting them know that they can't govern the fruit. And they had to send a whole thing out to the whole neighborhood.
You cannot see the orange tree from the road. Like, there's a solid wall, maybe 5-6 feet high. You can see the top of the orange tree, but you can't see the ground.
Well, it was funny.
I had to walk up the driveway and peek over the gate.
Well, yeah, I found out my neighbor was on the HOA board, so I think she was getting a ladder out and looking.
Anyway, so I don't know. We went down a rabbit hole here, but the point is, be careful.
Yeah. And then, so the last thing, and this is important for a home buyer, is keep your expenses at about 30% of your income. Because what I see is people, they want to, the bank is going to lend them X. So they think, okay, great, that's my payment. But they don't factor in insurance, property taxes, if you have an HOA, expenses of owning a home. If something breaks, all of that needs to be added in on top of the mortgage, PMI.
Right.
And so make sure, your realtor could be really good at stretching your budget and your lender can be really good at stretching your budget because it's not their day-to-day that matters. So you need to look at your own budget and you need to come up with how much you feel comfortable spending based on your payment.
And it's okay to bootstrap in the beginning, guys, and move in. Like, I think everyone's done that, right? Everyone's like saves to their last nickel. But just know, that's kind of what we're talking about with the savings account. Just know that this is the time that, especially that first year, is so critical.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard.
Keep your percentages down if you can. Don't go out and buy trinkets, new cars, and all that kind of stuff. You do not need that right now.
Yeah. And, I think so for some people, this is they might be the first person in their whole family generation that is owning a home. So they just don't really understand that, there are expenses associated with this, especially if you're not handy. You're going to need a handyman. You're going to need all of these things that you're not accounting for. And no matter how good of an inspection you get, you're going to have issues at some point. So you just need to make sure that you're not overextended. And if you do feel overextended, then that's when you need to save more money and wait. I mean, it's okay to wait to get what you want versus feeling pressured to get in right now. But it's really just doing an overall look at your situation and deciding what's best. And that's more important than interest rates and markets and all the different things for a first-time home buyer.
And you brought up one other good point of just before we wrap up here is if you have an adjustable rate mortgage, this could get worse for you if rates go up. So just keep that in mind. So sometimes you buy with a teaser rate, or maybe it's a rate for a year or two, and then you have that kind of rude adjustment of, a higher payment, especially if you have that. So you need to be thinking a year to 2 years out, in that first time frame. You want to save, you want to keep your expenses at that 30% range if you can. And you want to build some reserves up, and just always keep that. And don't go on a vacation with them, just and come up with a number and just make it a target.
But you brought up something that is good to end on is this includes those rate buy downs. So I know that the name of the game is you get a rate buy down and then later you can refinance for a lower rate because rates are going to be down by then. And while I do think that that's probably true at this point, you do not want to assume that. So you want to assume that after the rate buy down, you are going to be paying the current interest rate. So you should know what your rate buy down sets at once the rate buy down is over and that you can afford that payment. And if you can't afford that payment, then do not take the rate buy down because you just don't know. Rates could be higher. Like how nobody knows. So if your realtor says they know, or your lender says they know, or the builder says they know, nobody knows. So you just really have to consider that when you're taking a rate buy down.
Prepare for the worst, guys. And there's nothing that can touch you if you're managing your expenses and you have proper savings.
Yep. All right. See you guys next week.